there's a way you can begin with an ellipse and then generate your perspective from it. So the first thing that I'm going to do, you don't need to draw this, I just want you to pay attention for a minute. I'm going to draw in a minor axis. My minor axis is vertical, so what does that mean for my ellipse? It's going to be horizontal. So I'm just going to put in, I don't know, a random ellipse. It's probably about 20 degrees. But from this ellipse, I would like to generate my perspective. So I'm going to find the center of that ellipse. And at this point, I'm just going to establish one of my vanishing points by putting a line through the ellipse. I can pick any angle that I really want. I'm going to pick one that's fairly steep. And that's going towards my right vanishing point. So I've established my right vanishing point. I have an ellipse that's somewhat open. Where is my left vanishing point? Nope, it's not going this way. What I'm going to use is I'm going to use that same chord. So I'm going to use the chord. I'm going to create the chord and the happy pizza slices, and this line now has established my left vanishing point. You don't need to draw this. Let me do that one more time. I start with an ellipse, and I'll pick a different angle this time. I start with an ellipse. This time I'm going to pick a shallower angle. I'm going to say that's my right vanishing point. You could go right or left. And then again, now look what it's done. It shifted my chord over here. So now that would be my left vanishing point. So we're going to use that on this exercise. We're going to use that to start this exercise. Now what I'm looking at is I'm looking at how far down do I want to look at this this surface, and that's the reason why I chose this degree, which will use a very similar degree. So let's start on the table and lamp. I'm going to start basically right in the middle of my page. So now you need to draw along. I'm going to start with a vertical line. That's my minor axis, so I'm going to make this one a little bit thinner. I'm going to draw an ellipse that is bisected by that line. And now I'm going to establish my perspective, and you'll see a little bit more what I mean by that. I know that I want to see, when I'm looking at this object, the more interesting angle of this object is seeing the front drawer rather than the side. You don't understand completely this yet, but the reason why I want to do that, I want to see, I'm going to put this at a fairly steep angle. And that has established my right vanishing point. So just to review, how can I establish the left vanishing point? Chord, thank you. So let me draw one in that's incorrect. Is that my chord? My pizza slices aren't even. This one's going to be fairly close to flat, right? So I'm looking at this right here, and that's established my left vanishing point. So it's close to horizontal. There's not much angle in there. Now what I'm going to draw is I'm going to draw the top surface of this nightstand, or side table. And if I look at the top surface of that side table, it's not quite a square. It's a little bit less deep than it is wide. And then I'm going to come out, but I'm going to use this ellipse as kind of a gauge there. In fact, I'm going to use, since I've already stepped in a little bit to strike that chord, I'm going to use that line. But now I need to, if this is my right vanishing point, or going towards I need to make sure that there's some convergence in here. So I'm going to make this converge. That's the top right edge of my nightstand, and I'm going to draw one that hits this tangentially, I'm making sure that these converge. Let's stop right here and make sure that these three lines are converging slightly as they go back. And then I'm going to draw the back edge of this nightstand. These lines should also be converging slightly. To the left, yeah. Now, one thing I'm going to go ahead and correct a little bit is that, remember my three rules. Which of these converging lines should be converging faster? The one that's closer to its vanishing point, right? So the right vanishing point, the steeper one should be converging a little bit more, and I'm going to exaggerate what I've got just a little bit. Okay, so let's do the easy part first. The side of my nightstand, I'm evaluating the proportion here, but all I'm going to do is pull down from those corners. I've drawn that top surface. I'm going to pull down from those corners, straight vertical. I should still have some convergence going towards the left vanishing point, but not much. It's almost horizontal. Should have more convergence going back this way, so I'll see that. Let me evaluate that proportion compared to this. What do y'all think? The proportion, I need to make mine just a little bit taller. Whoops. I feel much better about that proportion. So let's move forward. Okay. So before we do any legs or before we do the drawer, what are my legs doing? They're diagonal, right? So on the bottom surface, I've ghosted in, or I've put in this bottom surface. On the bottom surface of this object, I'm going to draw and strike some diagonals. So from this bottom corner to the opposite bottom corner, and from this bottom corner to the opposite bottom corner. And my legs will basically sit on those lines just kind of coming down. And so I'm going to extend these lines. I'm about to really have to start paying attention to proportion. I'm going to extend these bottom lines down. Here's where I'll really start to see the convergence. Let me evaluate this proportion, the proportion of the top of this compared to the legs. What do you think that is? 1, 2, it's about 3 to 1. 1, 2, 3. Maybe a little bit more than 3 to 1. And I'll start to see this convergence going to the left vanishing point. A little bit more. That may be a little too much convergence. I'll really see this convergence going back this way. And I'm not going to stop with just the edges that I would see, but I'm going to finish that bottom surface. I did have a bit too much convergence going to the left side since this is so flat. All right, these same diagonals that I have here, I'm going to draw them on the ground, which this is where my nightstand is meeting the ground. And now I want to rough in the legs. And so if we think about where these legs are, what I want to do, this represents one of those diagonals. I want to think about this distance right here, and then let's see, the legs don't go all the way out to the extent. The legs do not go all the way out to the extent which I've just drawn, But if I look at this angle, I'm going to try and reproduce this angle. So I'm going to step in to about there along that diagonal. And then I'm going to step into about here along this diagonal and put in that angle. Make that real light because we don't actually see that line. That's kind of the center line of this object, and we'll need to bring it out in both directions. So to take where this intersected here, I'm just going to draw a line towards the left vanishing point to where it intersects this other diagonal. And I'm going to step in and guesstimate this distance. And I'm going to sketch in that angle of that leg. What I need to do, I'm going to continue kind of carrying these points around. And I can carry this point back. And that gives me the angle for that back leg. I can carry this point back, and that gives me the angle for this back leg. Now I'm thinking about the width of the bottom of the leg, or the length right here. And so I'm going to step in along that diagonal, what I guesstimate to be that length. And I'm going to draw, it's a slight taper. This leg gets thinner as it goes down, so there's a slight taper until it comes up and then it rounds off into a flat right here. This is my flat. That should be basically parallel with just a little bit of convergence going back. The same thing here. Which leg will appear to be thinner that we see? This leg or this leg? This leg. We're almost drawing the opposite of this right here. So if you look, this one looks like it's a little bit thicker across here. This one, since it's angled away from us, will be a little bit smaller. It's not a whole bunch. This angle that I just found is based upon the parallel of this, and then I'll put the little round on there. Now the challenge is that this thing isn't exactly, I have to add some thickness to this leg. So I'm coming out in this direction, and I'm going to add, the front of this leg is not crisp, it's got a round on it. The back of the leg is crisp, but I'm going to bring that point over. So I'm drawing a slight offset of the original kind of center line of that leg that I had, carrying it around there. I'm going to go ahead and darken in this part of this leg. I'm going to add some thickness to this side. So it's just a slight offset. Again, if you need to, grab your ruler and straighten some of these up, that's certainly fine. I just want you constructing most of it freehand. All right. I need to do the same thing with the back legs. Here's my offset distance. I can actually carry this point straight back towards the right vanishing point, and then add that offset. And then this leg back here, fortunate for you, we don't see much of it. We just see just this tiny little bit right here. Okay, so you guys can see a little bit better. What I'm going to do is I'm going to darken in with my ruler. This is the front bottom edge of where the drawer is. This is that top edge. There's a little bit of convergence. Here's that back edge. I don't actually want to darken that in because we're going to draw the lamp on there in just a second. Okay, there's one small little detail that I want you to pay attention to real quick. Look up at the screen. Right here, that corner running back to the back is round. This corner right here is round going back to that edge. We're going to draw that in. And so remember, we've talked about 3 line weight, and if there was an edge that's kind of facing you and you see all 8 legs of the spider, it might be a one line weight. We're going to represent this. In fact, don't draw what I'm about to draw, but I'm about to draw a little bit larger what we're going to try and do. So if this is that edge on that, if this is that corner, and in fact it's not crisp, it's round, this is actually a part of an ellipse, which we don't need to worry about that ellipse right now, but just know that it's a part of an ellipse. We'll get into that in more detail later. But the way I want to represent that edge is not with a single line, that is a corner. I really want to represent that edge where the radius or the fillet starts and where it stops. So if I was to put like a contour or a section line around this thing, that's what's happening. And this is at a pretty small scale. I don't know how much we're gonna see it, but let me show you what I'm gonna try and do. I'm gonna try and put just that little radius right there. And I'm going to draw 2 lines towards that right vanishing point to represent that radius. It softens it up. There's one on the bottom in the same place, so let me put that little fillet right there. And that silhouette line should be a little bit inside the original corner that I put on there, as will this one, but I'm going to put a little fillet right here. And we're not going to see much at all of it in the back. A little fillet right here. So there's the overall shape. Okay. Tell me what that drawer is doing. Is that drawer flush with the front surface?
No. It is recessed.
It is recessed. And in fact, it's recessed in a way, if we were to look at a section view of that bottom edge, so I'm looking right here. If we were to look at a section view, it kind of steps up and then back. The resolution of this drawing, maybe I don't necessarily need to show the chamfer and then the other step, but I do want to make sure that it looks like that drawer is recessed. That would be the bottom dark wood portion, and then this would be the white face of the drawer. I'm just going to make sure that I show this edge and the fact that it's somewhat recessed. We haven't gotten to the point where we can talk too much about contour lines and section views, but the way that I like to think about it is I like to think about that little step up and then step back in. I'm going to draw a parallel line. Well, when I say parallel, I mean it should be converging slightly, but the amount of convergence, I just want to make sure it's not converging in the opposite direction. And then the way that I can really show this is that because I'm looking at that recess from this direction, right? Because my object is rotated around this way, the edge of the drawer will be closer to this line, and that edge of the drawer will be further away from this line. Just like it is here. I see a little bit more distance over here because I'm looking at this from this angle than I do over here. It's so subtle, but these are the subtleties that can help make a drawing. I see more width over here than I see over here. Will I see more of the bottom or more width up here? I'll see more on the bottom because I see it, I'm looking down on this object. And that's all I really want you to do. I want you to make sure that this line that is the beginning of the drawer over here is closer to that line than this line over here. Just make sure there's less distance here than there is here. I don't really care about seeing the detail of the chamfer in there. I just want to see less space here than I see over here, and I want to see less space on the top than I see on the bottom. And something magical happens with our eyes, and it reads that as recessed. Let me darken that in. By the way, my favorite multicolored pen is starting to leave some undesirable smudges. Does everybody see that? Can you see in my drawing that simply because of this detail of making this smaller than this and this distance smaller than the one on the bottom, it gives the illusion that that drawer is recessed? Okay. The other way I can show that, and I'll just show you here real quick, I can draw a little chamfer in and then draw a little chamfer up here. And the center of my drawer, instead of being out here, has moved back just a little bit. And we need to know that because what we're going to do is we're going to add this little plus sign for the handle on the front. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm just going to draw a line right through the center, and then I'll offset it in both directions. I'll draw a line through the center here, which I already have, and offset it in both directions. And then I'll think about, and I'll put a little curve. There's a little curve there. There's a curve there for this plus sign. There's a curve here. And there's a curve here. Now, in reality, again, those are all little parts of an ellipse. All those little curves, they're half circles. And then I'm going to just give this a little bit of depth. So from this corner, going back towards the right vanishing point, I'm going to draw in that depth. From this corner, I'm going to draw in that depth. And then the wall to the inside, and then I'll see a little bit of a wall to the inside there. All right, so take a minute, and I want the support for this lamp to be right in the center of my object, which I need to move back just a little bit. You know what? We'll leave it on top of that original minor axis. We'll just leave it right there. So that's going to take care of this ellipse, and 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 this ellipse. Okay, so one thing to consider. If I start measuring some of the proportions here, what I'm really looking to try and do is find the center of each of these ellipses and the distance that that would be. So if I look at like the distance for the stem, I want to look at that distance right here. And then I'm going to step up a little bit more for this next ellipse, and then I'm going to step up a little bit more for the bottom of the lamp, which would be somewhere about right here. But those are the distances that ultimately I will evaluate, and I want to essentially plot on here. Now, I don't have the exact proportional relationship of this lamp to this table. I haven't seen them together, so I'm making a little bit of a guess, but the first dimension should set that proportion for the rest of the drawing. And so I'm going to look at this dimension and I'm going to try and put it right on this original minor axis. So there's my minor axis. Now, one other thing is I've got this small distance right here because we're actually going to draw this second ellipse, not the base, but we're going to draw that second ellipse first. And so I'm going to guesstimate that the base height is about there from here. And I'm going to sketch in a small ellipse. Now, it's kind of tough for me to evaluate that ellipse and its chord, so we're not going to do that just yet. But I'm going to move up to here because remember, I'm looking at this distance and I'm just going to go from center to center. So I'm going to go from center, I'm going to make it just a tiny bit higher. I'm going to put in another ellipse that represents the diameter of that tube. Now, if there was anything that I took into consideration when drawing those two ellipses, what would it be? If there's anything that I would take into, one thing that I would take into consideration with regard to the degree of these two ellipses, I am approaching what by moving from here to here? I'm approaching the horizon line, so which one should be thinner, skinnier? The top one should be skinnier. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to estimate this measurement, just the opening right there, and that's not much, so I'm just going to come up to here. I'm going to sketch in another tiny ellipse. And then I'm going to estimate the distance from here to here, which I think this is actually where the center of this ellipse would be. So that dimension, I think, is going to be something about like this. And now I'm going to draw the big ellipse. So the bottom of this lampshade. And evaluating that based upon what I've already drawn, it almost seems like this distance right here, this distance right here is very similar to the distance that I've already somewhat calculated from here to here. So I'm just going to estimate that. And I think I want to put an ellipse that is about yay wide. Now, how can I figure out what this ellipse needs to be? I know it needs to be this wide. I know where it is. My minor axis is straight up and down. We've already established that. I need to see a chord. So let me look at my vanishing lines. I'm just going to look at all these vanishing lines. It should move towards, to construct my chord for a horizontal ellipse, I need two vanishing lines. I need one going through the center, and I need one going towards the opposite vanishing point. And if you remember what our original ellipse was when we constructed the top and we built our perspective off of it, it was already pretty thin. This one should be even more thin. Let's see, it's going to be a little thicker than that. But I'm looking, and I'm pretty close, but I'm looking at these pie pieces. All right, so the next thing that I need to do is I need to step up more. Where is the horizon line relative to this lamp in this picture? In the picture.
Like right with the lower arm?
Somewhere about right here, I think. Might even be in the center of the picture. I might be holding that camera directly horizontal or vertical. So what's going to happen? So now I've estimated all these distances. I'm going to estimate this distance to the center of this ellipse, which should be right here. And relative to this is about This lampshade is about 3 to 1. So I'm looking at a distance about like that. And I'm going to just essentially try and draw the same degree ellipse, if anything, maybe a little bit skinnier. And then to check that, I'll strike another chord. So that's going towards the right vanishing point. And that's going towards the left. I'm close enough. When you do darken this in with your ellipse templates, you probably should check those chords once again. Okay, let's draw the arm. The arm is coming off of this stem, and let's just make it come straight off to the right. And so that should be going along towards the left vanishing point. Again, look at how little convergence is moving towards the left vanishing point. So it's almost parallel. And then I need to draw another center line for the stem coming out. And now I need to estimate this. This is a little bit further. This hinge is a little bit outside to the outside of our lampshade. Got a small ellipse there, a small ellipse here. These should be very similar degrees to the large ellipse that I drew right there. It's about the same distance off the horizon line. And then, you know, we're not getting into the fidelity of drawing the right and left ellipses. So even though I pointed out that there are a couple of additional minor axes, we won't really see them. We'll put just the line that, the little ellipse and line that represents where that hinge is. There'll be some intersection right here between those two cylinders. If anything, I want to make sure that this is not horizontal and is still moving towards a vanishing point. Let me grab an ellipse template. We're almost done with this drawing and right about on time. I estimated 40 minutes. Let's see, I bet this is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of a, oh no, I don't have a large enough ellipse template. So I'm not gonna darken it. I'll just do it by hand. Oh, so the lampshade. And you've already seen this with your cylinders. The lampshade, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come over to, I wanna draw a line that's tangent to both of those ellipses. Now I won't see the back of this ellipse, but I'm gonna go ahead and slow my pen down. And even though I don't have an ellipse template, I'm gonna darken in this and make sure it comes around and hits that line tangent. Darken in that line, darken in this ellipse. I have no idea how this lamp is held, this lampshade is held in place, so I'm just gonna make something up, put a little stem right there. Oh, we've missed one last thing. The base. to this lamp. I'm going to offset it in the same way that it's done in the picture, so I need to estimate this distance to get a new center. I'm going to make that go towards ultimately towards that left vanishing point, that line is. So here's my estimated center for the base. So I'm going to sketch in my minor axis, it's vertical. And I need to draw an ellipse that comes over and encapsulates that thing, and I'm just going to drop down and draw the exact same ellipse, just almost like a copy and paste. We'll check the degree in just a second. So if that's going towards the vanishing point, I'll draw in a chord. Again, it's pretty tough to see, but ultimately there's my pie piece and here's my other pie piece. So my chord's in there. I'll add the sides of that cylinder. Darken in the object lines for these ellipses. Darken in this bottom ellipse. If you pay real close attention, for this thing to rotate, there has to be a hinge, and there's a little seam right underneath this. So I'm going to sketch an ellipse that represents that seam. So what did I do wrong? Look at my proportions and tell me what I did wrong. Base is a little large. What about the lampshade? Too much of an angle. I'm gonna fix it. I also have just a slight little offset for, I guess it's just a finishing detail on that lampshade. Okay. In the interest of giving you guys more time to work on your text, I'm not going to finish the 3 line weight on this right now. Make sure you put the label on this drawing, FRE 08. I'm gonna go grab Shay because he's gonna demo this next one. Yeah. If you looked further down on it, like to a larger ellipse to give it a wider, fatter ellipse, and yeah, you look and move down on it, and then we would see less way.
That construction line for just like all over the place.
I did.
This one. Looks like a spider. Should we stop the video? Stop the video? No.